Welcome to Single Subject. We're going to explore a quantitative method of single subject research design. This is a project completed by Sarah Lee, Sarah Root, Courtney Todd, and Leah Mills. Single subject design, what is it? Single subject is used in quantitative research. It's a type of experimental design. It's a design used to test the effect of an intervention on a single individual or a set of individuals who are considered one group. It's used to examine functional relationships between baseline and experimental conditions over time with individual subjects. And it can be used to evaluate interventions based on any theory or approach. Here's a little quiz. Is single subject used more in quantitative or qualitative research? If you put quantitative, you're right. True or false? In single subject research, the participant serves as both the control and the treatment group. That's true. True or false? Single subject design may also be referred to as single case experiments and single system design. That's also true. So what is single subject research design? Here's a little video to show you a little more information.
The essence of single subject design is really using repeated measurement to understand an individual's normal variability so that we can use our understanding of that variability to determine what the effects of our treatment are. For me, one of the first steps in developing a treatment is understanding what an individual does. And so if I were doing a group treatment study, I would not necessarily be able to understand or see exactly what was happening with each individual patient so that I could make modifications to my treatment and understand all the details of what's happening in terms of the effects of my treatment. So that's one reason. So for me, it's a natural first step in the progression of developing a treatment. Also, with the disorders that we deal with, it's very hard to get the number of participants that we would need for the gold standard randomized controlled trial, so that using single subject designs works around the possible limiting factor of having enough subjects in a particular area of study. My mentor was Dr. Cynthia Thompson, who was trained by Leah McReynolds from the University of Kansas, which is where a lot of single subject design in our field originated. And so I think really I was fortunate to be a little bit on the cutting edge of this being implemented in our science back in the late 70s, early 80s, and we saw, I think, a nice revolution in terms of, attention to these type of designs, giving credit to the type of data that could be obtained from these designs, and a flourishing of these designs really through the 80s into the 90s, into the 2000s. But I think I've talked with other single subject investigators, and now we're seeing maybe a little bit of a lapse of attention and a lack of training again in our young folks, that maybe people assume that people understand the foundation, but they really don't, and more problems are, I think, occurring with the science. I think we need to reestablish the foundations in our young scientists, and this project, I think, will be a big plus toward moving us in that direction.
Single subject research is really useful. Single subject research refers to the study of a single subject over a period of time or phase to determine whether or not a given treatment, an intervention, is effective in changing one's behavior or score. Some characteristics of single subject research include that the investigator obtains pre-treatment measures, the baseline, which is denoted by A, and then introduces an intervention, a treatment denoted by B. The investigator continues to measure the subject's score after an intervention is introduced. Then the investigator determines whether or not any evident change in the dependent variable from the baseline has occurred. This is the AB design. There's more usefulness of single subject research. For example, there are advantages when only a few or a limited number of subjects are available for a study. In terms of careers, they are applicable to a range of clinical scenarios in special education behavioral health sciences, In clinical counseling, psychology interventions, they have been described as the best kept secret. They allow for better inter-subject control than group studies. An advantage is they can help identify functional relationships between an independent variable and a dependent variable, something a typical case study does not allow. They are well adapted for meeting quality assurance standards demanded by public and private health care agencies and organizations. They allow an investigator to correctly identify a confounding extraneous variable more easily than in group design. And finally, single subject research designs offer capability for examination of both intersubject and intrasubject variability. It's the least complicated design and it's easy to implement. Here's a little example of a single subject research design.
Fine. I am still exhausted. Hello, I have been working with a 5th grader named Timmy. He is always moving. If he is not out of his seat, he is talking or swinging his legs. I am so tired. I spoke to a friend in special education last night, and today I am documenting all of Timmy's behaviors in order to obtain a baseline. I am still exhausted, but I have hope that I will be able to find the correct intervention for Timmy. After documenting Timmy's behavior for several weeks, my friend and I decided to try positive behavior intervention supports using primary reinforcers such as tokens every time I caught him doing something good. Well, I've documented another 2 weeks using the functional behavioral time analysis when he is in my class to assess whether the intervention is working, and I believe that the PBIS has worked. The reason I believe this is because my friend and I graphed the results from the baseline and the intervention for the single subject design.
Single subject research design focuses on some external and internal validity. When the researcher is able to conclude that the independent variable affected the differences in the dependent variable, then internal validity is achieved. If the results of a study are generalizable, then the study has achieved external validity. Single subject research designs often do not have good external validity. The subject sample is normally limited. The findings cannot always be applied outside of the study, and therefore results are not usually generalizable. Single subject research designs more often have good internal validity. This is because there is experimental control, similarities and differences can be seen among subjects, and the findings can be applied to a specific population. Here's a funny little clip about internal validity.
Independent It's not independent variable. It's internal validity, folks.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Whoopsie. That was not an example. That was just a genuine mistake. Internal validity, the extent to which the experiment did what it was supposed to do. Did it rule out confounds? Did the effect observed really have to do with the independent variable? All right. So internal validity. Are we doing what we intend to do with our experiment? Are we measuring what we intend to measure? Are you manipulating what you intend to manipulate? Do you have an actual experiment, or did you just set up a little twinky little A-B design? Twinky? Whatever. Hinky. There's the word I was looking for. A hinky little A-B design. Which isn't experimental. So if you set up a quality experimental design like an A-B design, then we'll probably have internal validity, assuming you manipulated the independent variable well and you ruled out confounds, right? So then you have quality internal validity. You can have some confidence that the findings that you have some basis in reality, which allows you to draw more conclusions about the power of your independent variable.
The ABAB design that he talked about is a type of single subject research design that can be used. Finally, we're going to explore some similarities and differences between single subject research and other quantitative methods. Good evening. Today we will be exploring the similarities and differences of single-subject research design compared to other types of quantitative research design. The types of research design that we will compare with single subject include experimental, correlational, and causal comparative design. There are different types of research design, including experimental and non-experimental. Causal comparative and correlational are examples of non-experimental, while single subject is a type of experimental design. Single subject research design, also known as single case experimental research design, is a type of experimental research. Experimental research works to identify a correlation between the independent variable and the dependent variable, which means change to the independent variable will impact the dependent variable. Single subject design is the most common experimental design that researchers use. When using a single subject design, researchers focus on an individual to see how manipulation of an independent variable can impact the dependent variable. While there are many types of experimental design, there are also types of non-experimental research designs. Some of these designs include causal comparative and correlational methods. While both single subject and causal comparative are types of quantitative design, there are differences. Causal comparative identifies differences among groups using an experimental and control group, while single subject focuses on the individual. Another focus of single subject is on the cause and effect between variables. Not only is single subject different from causal, but from correlational as well. Correlational research focuses on how and to what extent variables are related, not how one impacts the other, like single subject. Some of the other research methods include many participants. However, with single subject research design, researchers are working with fewer participants, allowing quicker design and execution of their study. While it can be beneficial to have fewer participants, it can also be a negative. By having fewer participants, there is less data with which to compare. Those were just some of the comparisons between single subject and other research designs. Have a good night. While we showed some references throughout the project, here's a list of our references that we used. We looked in our textbook and also found some YouTube videos while exploring internet researches as well. We hope you enjoyed and learned a little something more about single subject research.